In this video, I'm going to be telling the story of Judge Angels. I've done some edits to the original story to hopefully make it a bit more enjoyable and flow a bit nicer. So if you do enjoy it, please let me know. I put a lot of time into this and it'd be nice to know that it wasn't for nothing. But with that being said, let's jump right into the story. Judge Angels. Today is an important day for the Clarks. After 10 months, Mrs. Clark is finally going to give birth to her child. Everybody in the region knows Mrs. Clark of the Clarks. That famous and serious judge lives here. After a few hours, the nurse delivering the child walks out from the room with an awkward expression on her face and goes to Mr. Clark's office to see him. Mr. Clark. The nurse looks at him with a shocked expression on her face. Yes? What is it? Mr. Clark looks at the panicking woman as he frowns. You might need to see it for yourself, Mr. Clark. What is it that needs me to go take a look at? Why not tell me now? Well, your child seems to be a bit special. The two arrive at the room where Mrs. Clark is taking a rest. She's laying on the bed, and next to her is Mr. and Mrs. Clark's child. Mr. Clark notices that the other people who helped with the birthing also seem to be embarrassed. When he walks up to the child, he sees his newborn baby, and instantly the expression on Mr. Clark's face becomes more shocked than everyone else's. The child is a girl with blonde hair, which may not seem unusual, but it was unlike her parents. Mrs. Clark has red hair, while Mr. Clark's is brown. But the most surprising thing, however, is that the girl has a pair of terrifying eyes. Her eyes are all black. The pupil, and usually the white of the eye, were pure black. What monstrous creature is that? Mr. Clark shouts furiously. Nobody talks back. Suddenly, Mr. Clark grabs the still resting Mrs. Clark. You didn't mess around with other people, did you? How can you give birth to such a monster? Mrs. Clark is very weak right now, Mr. Clark. Please. Like I care about it. Mr. Clark throws her back onto the bed. Tell my lawyer to come here, concludes Mr. Clark as he leaves the room. A few days later, Mr. Clark's lawyer, Taylor, arrives. Mr. Clark, about your daughter. She certainly is your daughter, without doubt. The DNA tests are not wrong, and the sight tests shown that her eyesight is normal. The doctor even said that he has never seen a case like this. Her eyeballs are black, but she has no problem with her eyesight. In fact, her eyesight is 2 times of a normal person's. Taylor, standing in front of Mr. Clark's desk, hands him a stack of documents of the girl's information. But she's a monster. She's not perfect. What I want is a perfect child, Mr. Clark says, without even taking a glance at the documents. Then, what should we do? Hand her to the orphanage? Taylor asks. No, that would affect people's impression of me. If that's the case, then I shall not let her go to school. I'll recruit tutors to teach her. Don't let anyone see her. Oh, also, tell the nurses who helped deliver the child not to tell anyone about this. This is a very bad issue for our family. Mr. Clark closed his book and looks at Taylor. If any accident happens, just finish her off. She is a failure. And that's all. Many years have passed. Dina Angela, the extraordinary girl, is now 13 years old. She doesn't like to talk, possibly because she was locked up in the mansion all her life by her father, therefore becoming rather antisocial. Dina knows her father is a very famous judge and that he does things very fairly, always looking at things from a neutral point of view. However, he always seeks for perfection in everything, which is why he had a very bad relationship with Dina. Despite knowing that her mother and father never got along so well with each other, even before she was born, it couldn't be changed. They had both decided to marry one another, even if it was far from a perfect relationship. Dina had never stepped outside of the mansion before because of her appearance, namely her eyes. She would look at herself in the mirror from time to time and gaze into her eyes. They were pure black, but if she looked closely, she actually could see sparkles in them, like a small galaxy. It often fascinated her, looking into her own eyes. Her blonde hair was short and messy. She usually brushed it, when her father was around at least, and occasionally she would spend time with her mother as she brushed it for her. For Mrs. Clark, she never cared much how Dina looks. She was always on her daughter's side, always thinking for her. Of course, she always knows what her husband, who did not like Dina at all, was up to, though she felt powerless to go against his will. Dina never had any friends. Her father made it impossible by isolating her from the outside world. And even though the house she was entrapped in was massive, it only made her feel more lonely. She used to have thoughts of having a friend or having a crush on a certain boy, but it was all impossible in this situation. Currently, the only person that supports her is her mother, Mrs. Clark, so she really adores her. Dina thinks about all the things she is missing as she gazes out of a window from the mansion and watches the passing kids laughing and playing together. Suddenly, Dina hears a knocking on her bedroom door. "Come in." Mrs. Clark enters the room and says, "Dina, I'll be going to the department store later. Do you want me to buy anything for you?" "No thanks, Mum. But dear, you haven't been eating anything recently, and you seem thinner than before. I'll buy you something to eat later." Mrs. Clark left the room before Dina can even stop her. "I told you I don't want it," she sighed. Despite saying no, Dina actually wants to try something from outside. Clothes, food, everything is so interesting to her about the outside world. But she wants to try something in the outside world, not just have it brought back to her. But no, Dina knows that ever since she was born, a maid was employed by her family. Her name is Meisha, and her job is to take care of Dina. But really, the maid's job is actually, in fact, to be Mr. Clark's bodyguard. He spent a lot of money to recruit this woman, to prevent Dina from causing any trouble, as well as protecting him. After all, who knows what Dina will do to him? Thinking about it, Dina giggles to herself. If I can, I would kill him. When Dina was finished with tutoring for the day, she would often leave her room and start wandering around the house. Even though Mr. Clark locked her up in the house, he never said anything about not letting her walk around and explore. It's a good thing the house is so large, as it gives her many places to explore. Her family is pretty much the richest in the region, but Dina isn't complacent just because of that. She also is utterly disgusted by arrogant people who only care for money and pride. Dina would often frequent Mr. Clark's collection room. Even though he strictly forbids Dina from entering that room, she always managed to sneak into it. In that room, she would stay for a long time. There were many interesting objects, one of which particularly caught her attention. It was a pure white sword, which was encased in a glass cabinet that was isolated from the other collections, as if it was something very special. Whenever Dina got close to the sword, it created a soundless resonance, as if she had some sort of connection with it. It would also reflect light in the most magnificent way that would have her captivated for hours, just gazing upon the sword. She once asked her mother about this mysterious object, and was told that according to legend, the sword originally belonged to an angel, and during a great war, the angel had dropped the sword into the human world, and had never been able to find it again. However, since then, the humans of the world began using it for different reasons. It was used to kill, to protect, or for personal benefit. The sword was passed down like this for many generations, until finally falling into the ownership of her father. There was also a legend that the sword considered one who builds a good relationship with it, its master for eternity. Such a beautiful sword. If only you could be mine. Dina's black eyes reflect the image of the sword. She places her hands onto the glass case and feels as if she's getting sucked in. Suddenly, she hears footsteps coming close, so she hides herself. The door opens, and someone comes in. It's Meisha. She's doing her daily patrolling. It's obvious that she's looking for Dina, since Dina left the room without her permission. To have her own actions restricted so badly, Dina stares at the maid with a hateful look. After scanning the room briefly and not finding what she is after, Meisha leaves the room in a hurry. Once the door closes behind her, Dina comes out from where she was hiding and looks upon the sword once again. In the evening, Mrs. Clark returns home with lots of things she bought from the department store. Almost all of them are daily supplies. Unfortunately, she bumps into Mr. Clark at the front door. He usually isn't around much, and today he seemed to be in a particularly bad mood. "What did you buy?" he asked accusingly. He grabs Mrs. Clark's arm as he asks her, and some of the items Mrs. Clark bought fell out onto the floor, including some of the food she had bought secretly. "Why did you buy this food? It's for that monster, isn't it? How dare you buy these things secretly?" Filled with fury, Mr. Clark pushes Mrs. Clark onto the floor. Dina heard the shouting coming from outside the house and ran out to her mother's aid. "Father, what are you doing? You have no right to call me father, you monster. You're not my daughter. My daughter would be perfect. You're nothing of the sort," spat Mr. Clark as he slaps Dina across the face, knocking her to the ground. He looks down at her with a mixture of rage and contempt, before turning on his heel and storming off into the house, slamming the door behind him. Dina picks herself up and walks over to her mother to see if she is okay. "Mother, are you alright?" "Don't worry, I'm okay," sighed her mother. "I'm quite unlucky today. How about you, dear?" "I'm fine, but I told you not to buy them for me. If Dad sees it, it doesn't matter, since you're my only daughter." Mrs. Clark touches Dina's face gently before saying, "Let's sleep together tonight, Dina. I don't want to be around him." But the truth is, Mrs. Clark cannot escape her husband's bind, even if she wanted to. She has thought of divorcing, but she can't give up on Dina. And even if the divorce was successful, it was likely that Mr. Clark would claim custody of Dina due to his high status and many connections in powerful places. "Mother?" Mrs. Clark sits on the bed while Dina lays down on her mother's lap. "Yes?" Mrs. Clark touches Dina's hair softly. "Mother, do you hate me?" "My eyes." Dina looks at her mother with her pure black eyes. "Of course not. Your mother really loves your unique eyes. You're my angel, after all." Angel. Dina suddenly remembers the sword in the collection room. "Mother, do you want to escape? Do you want to leave this home?" "Yes, I've always wanted to." "Then let's run away together." Dina sits up. "Let's leave this place. Then we'll find somewhere where no one will ever find us. A new place to live." Dina holds her mother's hand. "But Dina, your father is a famous person, and he knows a lot of people, so if he was to find us, we'd definitely be in a very bad situation." Mrs. Clark lowers her head. "But Mother, do you really want to live your life under Father's harsh treatment? You and I both know that one day I'll be finished off by Father. So let's escape this place before that happens." Dina's eyes are filled with the flames of her passionate feelings, and her mother sees Dina's passion. She holds Dina's hand and says, "All right." Seeing her mother determined too, Dina says, "Then we'll run away. I'll prepare a plan." Time passes, and the day of the escape has come. Dina and Mrs. Clark have decided that today was the day to leave this house that is no longer a home, instead a living hell. The master of this hell is a judge, and he is the law. Anyone who goes against him will feel his wrath. Dina has been waiting for this day. She has prepared everything, and now she just needs to wait for the evening. As the seconds, minutes, hours slowly tick by, Dina finally looks down at her watch. It is now 5 o'clock in the afternoon. I think it's time. Dina takes out a pennant. In it is a photo. It is a special gift she had bought for her mother. She had snuck out of the house one day to a newly opened antique shop near home. The shop sold many kinds of things, and one of them that caught her eye was the pennant. She thought it would be the perfect gift to give her beloved mother to commemorate the day of their escape. Suddenly, Dina's room door slams open, revealing Mrs. Clark, covered in blood, staggering through the door, screaming, "Run, Dina!" Before Dina can react, Mr. Clark pushes Mrs. Clark to the floor and walks towards Dina and grabs her. He shouts, You damn monster! I will kill you! How dare you sneak out of this house? Did you ever stop to think what would happen if you were seen? You were photographed exiting and entering the house. You've brought disgrace to this family. The news is reporting of a black-eyed monster that entered our house. And look at the front yard. It's covered with news reporters because of you. As he concludes, he throws Dina violently to the side. Dina was helpless against the power of her father. Flung to her side, she hits her head on the edge of a table and falls unconscious to the floor. When Dina regains consciousness, she notices the cold floor beneath her and the moist air. It seems as if she is in a dungeon. She recalls that Mr. Clark had a strange interest in medieval cultures. Therefore, she is not surprised that he had built a dungeon beneath his house. The more she thought about it, the more her father disgusted her. She slowly got to her feet, clasping her throbbing head, and began to explore the room she was trapped in. Cold rock walled her in, with big metal bars covering the only exit. There was a single door made out of metal, but it was fastened tight. There was no escaping this room. Despite Dina being very thin, even she couldn't fit between the bars. She slumped to the cold floor in despair. There was nothing she could do but await her inevitable fate. Suddenly, Dina hears echoing footsteps coming from the hallway outside of her cell. She looks between the bars and sees a person's silhouette moving slowly towards her. Hey, you little monster. How does it feel being here? The footsteps and taunting voice was coming from Meisha, the hateful woman. I knew your plans from the very beginning, and that's why I sent photos of you outside to the news reporters. You ugly creature. Meisha looks at Dina with a despising look. You beastly little girl. Finally in a cage where you belong. Oh, but aren't you the same? Dina interrupted. You're also being controlled by my father, aren't you? You're worse than an animal. You're just an object of my father that he'll discard when he's done with you. You think I didn't know that you'd seduce him every night? He'll lose interest of you soon enough, and discard you like the piece of trash that you are. Dina looks at Meisha and begins to laugh. You're just a common whore. Dirty pig. Meisha was growing more and more irritated, until she finally snapped. If you won't shut your dirty mouth, I'm gonna shut it for you. She opens the dungeon door and steps inside, eager to take out her anger on the still laughing Dina. Meisha let out a barrage of punches, pummeling the young girl, until Dina fell to the ground, coughing up blood. Enough, you freaking monster. Your father told me I can always finish you whenever I want, Meisha shouts as she stomps on Dina's head. That's enough. Dina, who is still being stomped, starts giggling creepily. Dina laughs hysterically as she opens her eyes widely. No! Dina grabs Meisha's ankle tightly as she screams. The one who should be being punished is you. Dina stands up, and with one hand still holding onto Meisha's ankle, she hits the woman in the kneecap with her other hand with immense power, instantly shattering Meisha's knee. The pain caused Meisha to scream out in agony. Then Dina throws Meisha to the ground and slaps her a few times across the face while she laughs. Scream, you bitch! Dina then starts to strangle Meisha. You shouldn't have provoked me. You should never provoke an angel. Meisha struggles desperately, grabbing at Dina's tight grip, scratching at her arms. But Dina doesn't feel anything, because she knows that the person in front of her has to be punished. That's right, Meisha. I knew all of what you've done, and have always known about it. So I need to judge you. Meisha Quest. Dina's face leaning in close to Meisha's. Her large eyes stare at the woman, and the woman looks back, terrified. What you have done cannot escape from an angel's eyes, so I now announce your... Dina strangles Meisha even harder as she whispers in the woman's ears. Guilty. Dina tightens her grip as Meisha's eyes roll to the back of her head. Now everything is quiet. After making sure that Meisha isn't breathing anymore, Dina stands up, excited, and says, "Phew, I killed someone." Dina laughs hysterically as she hugs herself because she has finally done something she had always wanted to do. It's time for more trials. Dina immediately switches back to her serious personality. She arrives at her father's collection room and walks towards the glass case, looking at the sword inside. It's time. Come. Even though she said she would leave this place, she had changed her plans. She would finish this once and for all, and leave this place along with her mother. An hour later, Dina, now covered in blood, arrives at Mr. Clark's office. Father. She opens the office door slowly, but sees no sign of her father. However, just before she is about to leave, she sees someone lying on the floor. She looks closer and sees the person clearly. She cries out, "Mother!" She runs over to her, dropping her sword and kneeling beside her. Her mother is covered in wounds and has a knife lodged into her stomach. She is no longer breathing. No, no, Mother! Nothing is left for her now. Even her beloved mother has gone. Dina cries as she hugs her mother. But then she notices a movement in the reflection of her sword. Someone is approaching her, and she recognizes him. When the person comes close, Dina suddenly grabs her sword and slashes at the person, making him fall. Hello, Father. One of Mr. Clark's legs is chopped off. Mr. Clark crawls on the ground, trying to escape, but Dina stops him by stepping on his wound, where his leg was chopped off. Ugh! Mr. Clark shouts. Father, I thought you were gone. It would have really troubled me if you were. Dina giggles as she stabs her father in his stomach with the sword. She stabs, and stabs, repeatedly plunging her sword into his stomach. Blood splattered everywhere, and she just laughed harder. What's going on, Father? Aren't you meant to be strong all the time? And look at you now. Weak. Mr. Clark, suffering from severe injury and excessive bleeding, glares up at Dina and shouts, You monster! Monster? No. I am an angel. An angel that is born to punish you. Dina raises her sword. Danny Clark, I now pronounce you're guilty. Dina slashes her sword down, chopping her father's head clean off his body. He had no time to react. The man's body falls lifeless, his head rolling across the floor. Dina slowly walks over to it, picking up her father's head, taking one last look at it. Father, I knew everything. All the evil that you have done thus far has been seen with my eyes. Dina throws the head into the burning hearth. For some reason, Dina notices that her blood is boiling and that she adores everything she has done. That's right. She now considered everything reasonable. She grabs her sword tightly, shaking her hands and shivering with delight. She has lost her mind. Dina puts her mother's corpse into a suitcase. Don't worry, Mother. I will find a nice place to bury you, Dina says to her mother's corpse as she gently strokes her mother's hair. Dina finds a fresh pair of clothes to change into. They are white, which matches her complexion. Almost ready to leave, Dina picks up the sword, which is creating a resonance which seems to express the joy of Dina. Is that so? That's right, I am now your master. I am an angel. I have the right to decide whether people live or get killed by me. Dina swings her arm wildly as she talks to the sword. She leaves the house with the heavy suitcase and walks towards the forest. She could smell smoke and hear crackling flames coming from behind her. It's amazing what a little bit of gasoline and a flame can do, she chuckled to herself, looking back towards the mansion, which was now engulfed in flames, before she steps into the forest, smiling with satisfaction. News of the fire at the Clark's mansion spread quickly, and firefighters soon arrived to put out the blaze. But it was too late. The damage had been done. After the fire was finally put out, the police scoured the wreckage. They discovered large amounts of dead, decapitated corpses, with harsh burns from the fire. The policemen suspected that most of the corpses were the servants of the Clarks. Of course, they also found Mr. Clark's body, with his head burnt to the skull, discovered in the hearth. Mrs. Clark's body was never found, but she was also suspected dead, as they found her blood in Mr. Clark's office. Taylor, Mr. Clark's lawyer, was also found dead after the fire started. He was also decapitated. Mr. Clark's neighbours were questioned whether the family had a child or not, and all of them answered no. No data on record showed of the Clarks having a child either. 1 month later. Good morning. This is David Starter here at Morning News. It seems that a few people have witnessed a sword-wielding girl in all white last night. Let's ask some of the witnesses about the incident. She's an angel. I saw her wings. She was carrying a head. She's a head-carrying white ghost. She's here to judge us. She's going to take our lives. A man who is watching the news on his phone on his way to work says, angels. It must be a lie made by stupid people. Like hell, angels exist in this world. He turns a corner, entering a dark alley, and lights up a smoke. Just before he puts the cigarette to his mouth, he is pushed to the wall by someone. In the very dim lighting, he sees a girl in white. Wait, can you be... The man struggles as he speaks, but the girl cuts in before he can end the sentence. Shh. You need to be quiet during a trial. Now, how dare you defy an angel? Because of this, I now announce you. Thank you for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, consider giving it a thumbs up, it helps out my channel. And maybe subscribe if you want to see more content like this in the future. I upload new videos every week, so I'll catch you guys in the next one. Bye.